All right, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Firstly, apologies because I said that I would produce 2 videos this week, and I didn't. It is not for lack of time, but I'm currently nearing the end of my semester of study, and there's a fair bit stacking up. I've got to write 2 essays in the next 2 weeks, so I've just been doing the research on that. The good thing is that one of those essays is on Aquinas's acquired virtues versus the infused virtues, which I'm going to make a video about because it's very pertinent to what we are looking at in the channel. And just briefly, I know you guys get probably sick of listening to my tirades, but that's why you're here, that's why you're watching, is that I think this kind of language and study of the virtues is important, not because it's necessarily going to change the way we live, but if you think about playing a sports match in any kind of sport, the more that you know the rules, the better that you can play it. That doesn't remove effort or talent from the game. You can have a very naturally talented player, someone who tries really hard and succeeds at the game. But ultimately, the better that you know the game, the more equipped that you will be to fight your opponent. And that's the point of studying theology and the spiritual life, is that ultimately what do you need to get to heaven? Baptism, and receive the Eucharist, and confess your sins. You don't need to know a single piece of theology to get to heaven, right? But when we're living in a world where we are assailed by so many opponents in a society that is so contrary to God, we need to study and prepare and treat our life like it's spiritual warfare, because it is. And that's my argument in this video now, the reality of spiritual warfare. This is not talked about enough, and I think for a very good reason, right? Because people that go about their life without being aware of spiritual warfare, especially Christians, I mean non-Christians too, is that you're open to get attacked because you don't even believe, you're not even aware of the enemy. So they're going to get into your head and they're going to get you to commit sin and become apathetic to evil, and you're not even aware of it, right? So this is about awareness of the battle that we're in, and I'm also going to give you tools here. But firstly, I obviously want to give a brief overview of what we're talking about. What is spiritual warfare? You've probably heard it thrown around. You've heard Father Chad Ripperger say it. You may have read it in some of the saints. What is it? St. Paul told the Ephesians this: "For our wrestling is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of the world of this darkness, against the spirits of wickedness in the high places." St. Peter said, "Be sober and watch, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, goes about seeking whom he may devour." So both Peter and Paul are referring to devils, demons, fallen angels who seek to confuse us and get us to commit sin, right? That's the first, you could say, cause of temptation, if you will. And then you have the world. The world, which is the society in which we live, unfortunately is not very Christian, and many people reject God and live lives of habitual sin. Which means that the world is going to present things that are evil and sinful and present them as good and as moral. And as Christians, we have to be on guard against that, because what happens, even if we intellectually know that those things are wrong, we become apathetic, right? It starts like osmosis. It slowly starts to creep in, the tendrils of modernism and liberalism. We've seen this even within our own Holy Mother Church. Protestantism, of course, Catholicism, and I'm assuming Orthodoxy, are the only Christian denominations. Obviously, there's only one true denomination, that's the Catholic Church, that say that contraception is morally wrong. All other denominations have folded to that. And I'm not going to get into the theology of it now. I'm just illustrating it as an example. And there's more examples, of course, that as the society shifts to the other side of the spectrum, it is almost inevitable for you, for the church, for your beliefs to start to follow it, right? Because you can't, it's very difficult to live in complete disunity with that, because we are members of society, we're in the world, right? I'm not justifying that. I'm just saying that's what naturally happens if you do not practice spiritual warfare, if you do not guard yourself. Because there is no morally neutral action. You are either fighting for the good, you're fighting for Jesus, you're fighting for the faith, or you're not. You're getting tempted and swayed and pulled by the world. That's not my words. That's Jesus' words. If you are not with me, you are against me. I will vomit the lukewarm out of my mouth, he says in Revelation. This isn't him casting judgment. He is stating a fact of reality. That if you do not fight, if you not gird yourself with the breastplate of righteousness and truth, and what does it say? The shoes of the gospel, with spiritual weapons, you will fall. It's as simple as that. So spiritual warfare isn't us just, making demons around every corner, right? Because that's not what it is at all. But it's understanding that we are in a battle for our souls. And that there are other parties, angels and demons, who have a vested interest in getting us to a certain place in the afterlife. And that's real. And we need to remind ourselves of that constantly because of this very fact. What's that quote? The greatest trick that the devil ever played was convincing people that he does not exist. Jesus himself, describing the Last Judgment, said this about the men who go to his left hand: "Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, which was prepared for the devil and his angels." I'm speaking to you as a Christian, not even as a Catholic. If you are a Christian, you have to be convinced of the reality of the supernatural world and eternal judgment. It is indisputable. It's indisputable. St. John Chrysostom said that the whole life of a Christian is battle. So, let's begin to talk about spiritual warfare itself. I want to describe some of the character traits of someone who does not believe in spiritual warfare. I've been quite affirmed in this idea. A lot of times when Peterson gets asked whether or not he believes in God, a lot of people think that he sidesteps it, which I think is a valid way of interpreting it. But basically what he's saying is, it's not about belief. It's not about whether or not I intellectually assent to these ideas. It's about whether or not my actions conform to the truth of God, whether they conform to the truth of Jesus Christ. And Father Moses, who I'm a big fan of, said the same thing. He was just on the Mike Thurston podcast. It wasn't like a super high quality convo, but he made this point which was very good. It's like, it's not about the truth or these arguments or all this theology. It's about, are you going to live the faith? How closely are you united to Jesus Christ? Are you denying yourself daily? Are you carrying your cross? Are you loving God above all else? Because nothing else matters. So this is already the first trap that I've illustrated, is that people will believe in Christ and they'll assume that that is enough. They'll believe in Christ, but they won't let that influence their actions. They won't let that influence their morality. They won't let that influence them waking up 30 minutes in order to cultivate a life of prayer. They believe in God, but they do nothing about it. That's problem number one. You don't believe. You don't truly believe. You're not acting like you believe. So not only that, you have intellectual belief, but you're not actively receiving and cultivating the faith, right? The seeds. There's that beautiful parable of the sower. If you're not cultivating your heart, the soil of your heart, to receive Jesus Christ, eventually that seed will wither and die, or it'll get choked out by the weeds. Again, the words of Jesus, not mine. And so that's the first problem, but the second problem is that not only are you not actively filling your life with the gospel, with Christ, but you're filling it with junk from the world. You scroll until midnight. You watch secular TV shows full of sin, of swearing, of blasphemy, of immorality. You listen to pagan music. Okay? You're not guarding your mind against the influence of the world, because those things do influence you. Plato in the Republic said that certain forms of music should not be allowed. In the Republic, 2,400 years ago, where all they would be playing is lyres, right? And they were probably singing poems. But he was already saying, if these poems or if these songs sing about debauchery and vices, that will influence the mind of the people. And do you not think in modern society, which is objectively probably millions of times worse than what Plato lived in, these things have not seeped into entertainment, into the music you listen to, into every single written word that you see out in public? So you're letting yourself be influenced by the world. You are emotionally unchaste. You don't practice chastity of the soul. What do I mean by that? You pour out your heart to anyone. You fall in love all the time, right? You have an inability to guard your interior life from others. You're like an open book, right? There's like a hyper emotionality to the modern world, which is very dangerous because not only I think you allow yourself to be taken advantage of, but you also, instead of having that rich emotional and spiritual life in communion with Christ, you end up giving that over to the world. And you don't allow proper self-reflection to take place, like self-examination. And that ties back to the lack of prayer, right? You have no rule of life. Very big problem. People aren't intentional about how they live. And all of the things that I'm talking about, this is spiritual warfare. If you don't pray, if you scroll until midnight, you're filling your mind with garbage, you are emotionally unchaste, you talk all the time, you're gossiping, you're pouring your heart out left, right, and center. You have no rule of life. You don't practice physical disciplines. You don't fast. You don't train. You eat junk food. Even if you eat positively most of the time, you're doing cheat meals and stuff. That's opening the door for the devil. If not the devil, it's opening the door for vice because you're not fully committed. You have no rule of life. There's no line that you hold every single day. Do you take cold showers? No. Or I thought I would take them, but man, Tuesday was really cold and I just got home and I was tired, so I had a hot one. Fold. Compromise. You are not preparing. You are not preparing for hardship. You are not preparing for temptation. You are not preparing to fight for Jesus Christ tooth and nail. You should be training for your martyrdom, okay? That's one of the slogans that I need to bring back to Fit for the Kingdom. We train for martyrdom. Yes, martyrdom is a grace, because to give your life for God is ultimately an act of supernatural charity, because you're doing something for love of God above all else, above even your own life. But you want to cultivate your personhood, your soul, to be more disposed to something like that, right? All the apostles died, aside from John. They were all martyred. That's our example, right? See, so to give a few more practical diagnosis of what this looks like, those are some broad ones. You've got the phone by the bed, you don't pray in the morning, you get angry, you allowed yourself to be swayed by passion. Why haven't I not spoken about this yet? Lust. You may have a problem of addiction to pornography or masturbation, lusting after women. The sexual desire, which is one of the most strongest desires within the human body, is your master. You are a slave to it. And there are demons of lust that will capitalize on that and want you to be trapped within that for the rest of your life. And not only do they want you to be trapped, but they want you to despair. Okay? That is the issue that I see most often with men who struggle with lust, is that not only do they commit all the errors which I've talked about, which is that they don't live with intention, but then once they do fall, they fall into a cycle of despair. God will never forgive me. They label themselves. I'm addicted. I just keep going up and down. I can't do this. I have a problem. All of this negative language, which leads them to never actually get the problem sorted. They're just a constant up and down, up and down, up and down. And people will live like that for years without actually thinking, what can I do to fix this? The saints achieved, chastity and purity is a supernatural virtue. They're infused virtues, right? But there is a natural temperance that has to be built. And that's what I talk about all the time on my channel. Don't believe that you need some kind of miracle or some supernatural grace to stop watching porn. to stop masturbating, because that's not true. You need discipline. You can practice abstinence. You can achieve abstinence through your own powers, because that is just natural temperance, okay? Many secular people practice this. There's a whole movement around it. So don't tell me that you can't do it. You're just not trying hard enough. And that might be hard for some of you to hear, and I'm not trying to shame you. Most people struggle through this. It's basically a rite of passage, because the world of flesh and the devil leads us to those habits, leads us to those vices. But you can get out, and you need to get out of that victim mentality that says you can't, because you can. I know for a fact you can. All the saints have. There's many people, as I said, many secular influencers that talk about this. Now, when you're struggling with that, well, not only are you in a state of moral sin, which blocks you from other graces, from receiving other graces, but it just leaves a door open for the devil too. The devil enters through the lower faculties to poison the higher faculties, right? The sin of the flesh then turns into intellectual sins of despair, of apathy, of pride even, all of these other things. Waking up and reaching for your phone. All of these tiny moments add up. Alarm clock, hitting snooze. Again, that compromise on your intention. This is all spiritual warfare, okay? Every single one of these things that we've talked about. The devil doesn't even need you to commit a grave sin. As long as he can get you on those small, unguarded moments. Let me give you an example of my own life. I'm a very busy man. I study, I work, I have a newborn son who I spend time with. The devil is not going to get me to fall to some great sin of lust or probably even pride. Although pride is probably, one of the sins that I'm more disposed to commit based on my different initiatives, right? But the way the devil would try to get me is like, let me get him to pick up his phone all the time, right? Let me get him distracted. Let me get him to look on Twitter or something and waste his time on that so I can distract him from doing what he needs to do. Maybe, can I get Tomas to focus on his work all the time so then he ignores his wife and then he starts to have relationship problems? So you see there, I can be distracted by not fulfilling my rule of life. If I haven't actually sat down and said, well, how many hours can I actually spend on this? What do I want my relationships to look like? What are my baseline commitments to all of these different things? If I don't have that very clear from the get-go, and of course, all of these things are controlled by prudence and a life of prayer. If I don't have a life of prayer, not only can I not get clear answers to those questions, but within prayer is when you adjust, right? Within prayer is when those things are revealed. Actually, maybe I could do better in that scenario, or maybe I do need to cut back on that in order to spend more time on this. Maybe I'm not spending enough time with my wife, and I need to fix that problem. If I don't have a habit of prayer, I will be ignorant to those things. So the devil can get me there, right? And exteriorly and interiorly, I could think, man, I'm doing great. I'm so disciplined. I'm doing all this time. Sure, I might be using my phone too much, but it doesn't matter. But the devil's succeeding. He's creeping in. And if I don't have that rule of prayer, if I don't pray the rosary every day, if I don't practice spiritual warfare, if I don't practice fasting, I'm going to be much more inclined to be tripped up on those. So you can see how you're constantly trying to move that needle forwards. There's no such thing as being too far there, because when you're too far there, you're completely united to the will of God and you're living a life of holiness. But the more you compromise, the more you fall back, the more that you get influenced, and the less holy you are. It's as simple as that. Spiritual warfare is about unity with God and about unity with Christ and about fulfilling the will of God here on earth. And all the devil wants to do is distract you from that and keep you trapped in sins of the flesh and things like that. So all of this is spiritual warfare. So hopefully that is clear. And you could say a lot of what I talk about on my channel is how to fight spiritual warfare. What are things you can do? How do you get your morning routine on track? How do you start a prayer routine? How should I integrate fasting? How should I integrate physical discipline into all of this? That being said, let me give you a few pointers if you haven't seen my other videos, or just if you're obviously watching the video. First, most important principle is you need to have a rule of life. Okay? It's exactly what it sounds like. A rule of how your life is lived. What is your minimum prayer time per day? What time do you wake up? What time do you go to bed? What time do you put your phone away before bed? At least an hour, right? You want to have that quiet time in the evening. You want to unwind. You want to prepare for sleep. How much scripture are you reading per day? Number 2, one test for every decision in your life, for everything that you go to do, even if it's to watch a TV show or something. Is this bringing me closer to God or further away? St. Faustina's 25 Rules for Spiritual Warfare. Go watch that video. I'll link it up here, hopefully, or the other side. I want to mention 2 because they're very important, but go watch the whole thing. Direct revelation from Christ to St. Faustina. Don't pour out your feelings to everyone, and be silent when rebuked. Cultivate humility. Guard your interior life. Your interior life of prayer is the most important thing in the world. Don't let it be taken away from you by stupid decisions or by staying up late, watching some bull crap on TV, and then you're too tired to pray, or you sleep in the next day. Because you've got to pray every night too. But you've got to pray every morning, most importantly, because you're not guaranteed the night. Guard it. Defend it. The morning is the gate of the day. Defend it with prayer, okay? Just like you'd guard anything else. Just as you'd guard watching sports, watching the final, all this other crap that we make time for. Why are you making time for things of the world and not making time for God, for eternal things? Inform yourself. Read books about the spiritual life. The most important book I'm going to recommend you is Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales. It's literally a manual for the spiritual life. It's a playbook. He tells you how to do all of this. He gives you the warnings, the advice, what you should do, how to confess, how to go to Mass, how to pray in the morning, what to meditate on. It's all there. The only reason you don't know this stuff is because you don't want to know it. The spiritual tradition has been there for 2,000 years. The Gospels have been there for not quite 2,000 years, but basically 2,000 years. We've had the canon of Scripture all that time. The only reason you're making these silly mistakes is, number 1, because you don't want to change, because you're stuck in your ways, you don't have intention, and number 2, because you're not actually going to the right people to figure this out. This is all territory that has been covered by the fathers of the church, by the men and women, the saints, okay? This isn't rocket science. It is difficult because it is a war, it is a battle, but you're more than capable of fighting with God's help, with the grace of Jesus Christ, okay? So, I think that's all I have for that. Obviously, the sacraments, confession, Eucharist, and the Rosary, you know, if you're not doing that, you're going to struggle. You need to do that. You need to pray the Rosary every day. Another book that I'm going to recommend, and we have a book list down below, which will be linked on the website, but The Story of Fatima by Father Andrew Apostoli. He obviously tells you the story of Fatima, which is very important. It's the most widely attested miracle of all time in terms of eyewitnesses, more so than the resurrection. But the lessons, the advice, the warnings that Our Lady gives us there is very pertinent to today's day and age, and it's all about spiritual warfare. So that's all I have for you. Just quickly, as I mentioned at the start, you know, I'm writing this essay on Aquinas. While everything is spiritual warfare, we want to be careful in separating the physical and spiritual realm too much. Because us as men and women, we are body and soul in one. We're not just a body and a soul, but to be human is to be body and soul. So nothing that affects the body will not also affect the soul. Or more rightly said, everything that influences the body influences the soul. So that is why you have to practice physical discipline in order to cultivate spiritual discipline. We must die to the deeds of the flesh in order to live in the spirit. The fruit of discipline, okay, the spiritual fruit of discipline is peace and righteousness, it says in Hebrews. You can't split these things up. As much as I'd love if they were split up, I mean, I'd love to just pray all day and do nothing, and not have to push myself. But you do, because those two things are linked. And we're not just called to have this interior life with Jesus, but we're called to bring Christ to others. We're called to bring Christ to the world. We're called to make the kingdom of heaven manifest on earth. And that requires physicality. That requires the cultivation of your talents. So you cannot live with these two realms separate. You have to pray as if everything depends on you. Pray as if everything depends on God, and work as if everything depends on you. And those are the words to live by. All right, guys. Well, hopefully this has been a bit of a kick up the arse, because that's what I intend it to be. Spiritual warfare is real, and you're in that battle whether you like it or not. And if you're not aware of that, or if you choose to continue ignoring it, you're going to be on the losing team. You're going to be on the losing side, whether you like it or not. And I think it's very important to read the Gospels around this, because Christ, at least 5 to 10 times, warns about the unfaithful servant, the unfaithful steward, the guy who buried the talents. There are a lot of people who are fitting that bill at the moment. They're burying their talents. They're not keeping their oils, their bloody lamps filled with oil. They're not prepared. Are you prepared? If Christ was to come right now, you're at 26 minutes and a half. Minute 27, it's the second coming of Christ. Are you ready for judgment? That's what Christ says in the Gospels. You know not the time and the hour. So prepare, brothers. Fight. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing that Christ invites us to. Intimate communion and relationship with Him. But it requires our cooperation. What do we have to do? Knock, and the door shall be opened. You still have to knock. You still have to ask. If you're not doing that, well, you're not just going to magically appear at the door at the end of your life. You have to be knocking. You have to be asking. You have to be receiving Christ in the sacraments. All right, that's all from me, guys. Make sure you check out the links in the description. We've got the Legion. We're currently putting some new resources up on school. We're running a few new calls. We've got Theology of the Body, starting with Father Ben, hopefully next week, which will be, I think, an 8 or a 10-part, effectively a lecture series, but they're going to be an interactive Q&A as well, so you can ask questions, you can learn. So if you want to be a part of that, join the Legion. It's worth 2 cups of coffee a week, equivalent of, and you get access to me. There's Q&As, there's a whole bunch of cool stuff in there. You get to meet some of the other guys involved. And if you want to explore working with me one-on-one, maybe you need a bit of help, you've tried a few things, you failed, you want some help with the implementation, you want a roadmap, I have a link in the description below with some details about what I do, and you can apply to that. We can have a conversation and see if it works out. I don't work with many people because it requires a lot of time and attention, but if you feel like that might be you, let me know. All right, that's all from me, guys. Happy Sunday. Have a great week, and God willing, I've only got 2 weeks left of study. I'll be able to get back on the YouTube grind a bit more effectively, and also sort out this webcam. I think we've made a bit of an improvement. Got the sun reflecting off the floor there, which you may have noticed over the course of the video, but we definitely made some improvements. I'm going to get this sorted, and we'll see you next week on the next video. May God bless you.